Hey everyone! If you enjoyed this video, the full version is available on Patreon. I'll be uploading all my content there going forward.
Chapter 1. Throughout the ninja world, in times of war or peace, conspiracies and intrigues have been quietly unfolding in the shadows every day. The sky is always the same sky, the clouds come and go, it never changes. Until this moment. Without warning, a curtain of light stretched across the sky, extending from one end of the horizon to the other, dividing the entire sky into two halves. The light curtain was translucent like glass, with a faint blue glow at the edges. It was almost imperceptible in the sunlight, yet everyone who looked up could clearly see its presence. Although no images have been shown yet, anyone in the ninja world with even a little perception can understand that this is an unprecedented anomaly. In the first year of Konoha's existence, Konoha village was undergoing rapid construction. In their youth, Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha stood on their favorite high platform. This is the highest point in Konoha village, offering a panoramic view of the entire village. Many of the building's wooden piles and foundations have just been driven in, and workers are busily moving about below like ants. Ban, look at that! Hashirama Senju raised his hand and pointed to the sky, his thick eyebrows furrowing slightly, and he unusually suppressed his usual carefree smile. Madara Uchiha had already noticed the anomaly. He crossed his arms, his Sharingan unconsciously activated, attempting to analyze the chakra structure of the light screen. A moment later, Madara Uchiha snorted coldly. There's no chakra fluctuation, and it's not a genjutsu. The two exchanged a glance. Their years of tacit understanding allowed them to comprehend each other's thoughts without a word. The danger level of this thing was unknown. Hashirama Senju took a step forward, and his hands began to form hand seals. Let me test the waters with my wooden clone first. Hashirama. Madara Uchiha interrupted sharply, slamming a hand heavily on Hashirama's shoulder. Konoha village has only just been established. You are the Hokage, how can you be so reckless? If this light barrier is aggressive, that's why it should be me. Hashirama Senju turned his head and gave a relieved smile. My regenerative abilities are the strongest, Madara, you know that. Ridiculous. Madara Uchiha released his grip, a smug smile playing on his lips. In terms of defense and survivability, Susanoo is no less capable than your sage body. And. He paused, looked down at the village under construction, and his voice lowered. You are the Hokage, and I am not. At least not yet. Before he finished speaking, azure chakra erupted from Madara's body. Rib-like skeletons rapidly constructed in mid-air, followed by muscles and armor. In an instant, the complete Susanoo rose from the ground, its wings unfurling behind the blue giant, stirring up a gust of wind. Spot, wait! Hashirama Senju reached out to stop him, but Madara Uchiha had already controlled Susanoo to soar into the sky, heading straight for the light barrier. Just then, Tobirama Senju appeared on the high platform using the Flying Thunder God technique, his silver hair fluttering slightly in the wind. As he gazed at the colossal Susanoo in the sky, his steps toward Hashirama Senju involuntarily slowed, a complex expression flashing across his face. Big brother. Tobirama Senju walked behind Hashirama and whispered. I've received intelligence that this light screen can be seen from every corner of the entire ninja world. The land of rain, the land of earth, the land of lightning, the land of water, feedback has already been relayed back via the communication hawk. Hashirama Senju didn't turn around, his gaze remained fixed on Madara Uchiha's figure. Did you find anything? No. Tobirama Senju gave a concise answer. It seems to simply exist, without producing any chakra reaction, neither absorbing nor releasing energy. Physical contact is likely ineffective, just as Madara is proving. In the sky, the complete Susanoo swung a giant chakra blade, slashing through the clouds, but it passed straight through the light barrier, as if it were just an illusion. Madara Uchiha frowned and tried to use his Susanoo to directly collide with the target, but the result was the same. The light barrier seemed to exist without it. Susanoo's entire upper body passed through it without touching anything. Madara Uchiha dispelled his Susanoo and landed on the high platform, expressionless. It's not a physical entity, not made of chakra, and not a genjutsu. I've never seen anything like it before. Hashirama Senju patted him on the shoulder. At least for now, it doesn't seem dangerous. Temporary calm does not mean there are no threats. Tobirama Senju's calm analysis. Brother, we need to call an emergency meeting. The 5 great nations can all see this now, the other ninja villages might overreact. Hashirama Senju nodded, his expression turning serious. He gazed at the tranquil curtain of light in the sky and said in a deep voice. Tobirama is right. Ban, let's go to the meeting room together. Notify all Jonin. Year 20 of Konoha, the battlefield of the First Shinobi World War. The smell of blood filled the air. This is the border of the land of hot springs, where the battle lines between Konoha and Kumagakure have been deadlocked for months. The ninjas on the battlefield ignored the light screen above their heads. Or rather, they dared not be distracted. In a life-or-death struggle, a moment's carelessness can be fatal. Konoha Year 37, during the Second Shinobi World War. The Land of Rain. Danzo Shimura, in the prime of his life, stood in the makeshift command post, looking out the window at the distant battlefield. The 3 disciples of the third Hokage, Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade, were fighting against the demigod Hanzo there. Although they were miles away, the sounds of explosions and fluctuations in chakra could still be heard. Danzo, are you sure you're not going to lend a hand? Xiao Chun, who was turning over a new room, frowned and said. This is their battle. Danzo Shimura's voice was firm. As a disciple of the Hokage, this is an event that must be experienced. If you can't even get past Hanzo, then they will never truly be able to stand on their own. He paused, then looked up at the curtain of light in the sky. But this thing, it's been out for 5 days now, any new intelligence findings? Mitokado Homura shook his head. No. We've tried every detection method, it's like it doesn't exist, yet it's definitely there. Other major countries are also researching it, but they seem to be finding nothing either. What's Hanzo's reaction? Danzo Shimura asked the question. Omegakure seems to regard the light barrier as some kind of miracle. Hanzo himself has not made a statement, but the common people of the Land of Rain have already begun praying to him. Danzo Shimura looked disdainful and said in a nonchalant tone. In chaotic times, people always seek solace in the emptiness of life. A loud bang came from afar, followed by a massive burst of chakra. The 3 streams of chakra collided with another powerful and chilling force. Several days later, at the height of his life, the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, was full of vigor and ambition as he took charge of Konoha. Konoha's strength is now firmly in first place in the ninja world, and their own disciple is actually able to fight against Hanzo of Omegakure, who is known as the demigod of the ninja world, and has even earned the title of Sunin. I have not let my teacher down after all. Konoha 48th year. The 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, stood by the window, gazing at the sky above Konoha, his brow furrowed. The investigation team submitted its report yesterday, concluding that the analysis remained unresolved. He had only been Hokage for a short time. How did this thing appear? I don't know if it's good or bad. Chapter 2. In the 60th year of Konoha, Team 7 was formed. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, stood in his office, using a telescope technique to observe the 3 figures of Team 7 in the distance. Naruto was excitedly talking to Kakashi, Sasuke stood with his hands in his pockets and looked indifferent, while Sakura was trying hard to get Sasuke's attention. Hiruzen Sarutobi took a drag of his cigarette, slowly exhaled the smoke, and a relieved smile appeared on his wrinkled face. Minato, no matter what, Naruto has grown up. He murmured to himself. He recalled the night of the Nine Tails 12 years ago, and the heavy promise he made when he received baby Naruto from Minato. Over the years, he was not unaware that his treatment of Naruto was controversial. The hero's son grew up in the cold eyes of the villagers, living in a shabby apartment and eating expired milk. But as Hokage, he had to consider more. The Jinchuriki's identity needs to be kept secret, and the villagers' fear and hatred of the Nine Tails also need an outlet. If you were in Minato's shoes, what would you do? Hiruzen Sarutobi looked up at the sky and murmured a question. At the same time, this celestial canopy appeared in various historical periods, including the 5th Hokage Tsunade, the 6th Hokage Kakashi, and the 7th Hokage Naruto Uzumaki. For a time, they were all trying to find out and deal with the situation. Qin Xiao, a hardcore Naruto fan, was unaware that the Naruto short videos he watched daily had been uploaded to various eras of the ninja world. Just as the ninjas were getting used to the presence of the celestial canopy, the image on it finally stabilized. Strange text and patterns were displayed on it. The writing was not any known language in the ninja world, but strangely, everyone who saw it could understand its meaning. At that moment, a mechanical voice, indistinguishable between male and female, rang out. How would you evaluate the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi? Countless ninja worlds fell into a deathly silence. Then, a collective gasp filled the air. The era of the first Hokage. Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha stood side by side on the high platform. The change in the sky made Hashirama Senju instantly forget the topic they had just discussed. His eyes widened and his mouth slightly agape. The third Hokage. Hashirama Senju blinked and turned to look at Madara Uchiha. Madara, did I hear that right? You said third Hokage, right? Madara Uchiha stared at the sky, his brows furrowed. That's right, it's the third Hokage. Hashirama Senju froze for 3 seconds, then burst into a deafening laugh. Ha ha ha. That's great, Spot. Did you see that? Konoha is still here. Not only is it still around, but it has been passed down to the third generation. He slapped Madara Uchiha's back hard. Our dream has come true. Konoha has truly survived. Peace has certainly continued. Madara Uchiha was knocked off balance by the slap, and angrily shook off Hashirama's hand. Don't get too excited, Hashirama. The origin of this light screen is unknown, and the information it contains may not be true. But Hashirama Senju was completely immersed in joy. But Madara, think about it. If it's fake, why would they go to the trouble of making up a third Hokage? If it were a prank, wouldn't it be more impactful to simply say that Konoha was destroyed? This shows that Konoha has existed for at least a very, very long time, long enough that it required the third, fourth, or even more Hokage to lead it. Madara Uchiha remained silent for a moment. Although Hashirama's logic is simple, it is surprisingly persuasive. His gaze returned to the sky, a complex emotion flashing in his eyes. If Konoha truly continued to exist until the third generation. So, who was the second Hokage? Could it be myself? The thought had barely crossed his mind when he suppressed it. He knew Hashirama, that guy would definitely give up the Hokage position to him. But what about the rest of the Senju clan? What about the clans of Konoha? Would they accept themselves becoming Hokage? Spots. Hashirama Senju's loud voice interrupted his thoughts. Don't overthink it, you must be the second Hokage. And this Hiruzen Sarutobi is the third generation. Hashirama stood with his hands on his hips, brimming with confidence. The Sarutobi clan, they're that mid-tier clan that excels in fire release and earth release, right? They had only recently joined Konoha. His son's name is Hiruzen? He's only about 8 years old. Ban snorted coldly. So this 8-year-old kid I've never even heard of will become Hokage someday. Hashirama, you actually believe this? What are you so proud of? This proves that Konoha is fair. I said seriously. It's not only members of the Senju and Uchiha clans who can become Hokage, outstanding individuals from other clans also have a chance. That's precisely why we founded the village. Looking into Hashirama Senju's sparkling eyes, Madara Uchiha turned his face away, but the corners of his mouth unconsciously turned up slightly. Meanwhile, at the Sarutobi clan's ancestral home in Konoha village, clan leader Sarutobi Sasuke stood in the courtyard, gazing up at the sky, his teacup hovering in mid-air, unaware that the tea had spilled out. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. He muttered those words repeatedly, then suddenly turned his head to look inside the room. His 8-year-old son, Hiruzen, was excitedly waving his arms and shouting at the sky. Father! Father! My name is written on the caption above. I will become Hokage someday. Sarutobi Sasuke took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He walked over to his son, knelt down, and placed his hands on the young Hiruzen's shoulders. Hiruzen, listen to me. Whether this is true or not, from this moment on, you must hold yourself to the standards of a Hokage. Why, father? The young Hiruzen tilted his head. If I'm truly destined to become Hokage, then I don't need to work hard now, right? On the contrary. Sarutobi Sasuke said seriously. If this is true, then every action you take, every choice you make, could affect the future. If this is false. He looked up at the sky, a glint of light flashing in his eyes. Then this is an opportunity. The entire ninja world has seen this name, and everyone knows that Hiruzen Sarutobi may become Hokage. This will be an opportunity for our people, and it will be an opportunity for you, but only if you deserve it. The young Hiruzen nodded as if he understood, but his eyes had already become serious. Sarutobi Sasuke stood up, his mind churning with thoughts. Regardless of whether the information from the sky is true or false, the Konoha leadership will inevitably take notice of the Sarutobi clan. How would Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha view this? How will the other families react? He must take the initiative to meet the first Hokage. Chapter 3 Konoha Village, during the second Hokage's era. The delegation heading to the Land of Lightning for peace talks stopped in the forest. Tobirama Senju looked up at the sky, a rare flicker of emotion appearing on his usually calm face. Among the ranks behind him, the young-looking Hiruzen Sarutobi and Danzo Shimura also heard the voice from the sky. Tobirama Senju's heart sank. This news is true, at least the part about Hiruzen Sarutobi becoming Hokage is true. He did indeed groom Hiruzen Sarutobi as his successor, valuing the young man's calm personality, outstanding ninjutsu talent, and natural leadership within the team. But he never revealed this decision to anyone, including Hiruzen Sarutobi himself. But now, Tianmu has made all of this public. Tobirama Senju quickly scanned the reactions of his team members. His 6 disciples Hiruzen Sarutobi, Danzo Shimura, Kagami Uchiha, Homura Mito-Kato, Koharu Udaten, and Torifo Akimichi each wore a different expression. After his initial shock, Hiruzen Sarutobi quickly regained his composure, merely gripping his kunao tighter, his gaze becoming even more resolute. Meanwhile, Shimura Danzo, standing to the side, had a contorted expression on his face, his mind screaming with rage. Damn it! Damn it! Why was Hiruzen the third Hokage and not me? What makes me inferior to him? Although he didn't speak, everyone present could feel the barely contained resentment and jealousy he was radiating. Uchiha Kagami seemed lost in thought. Mito-Kato Homura and Udaten Koharu exchanged a glance. Akimichi Torifo rubbed his stomach and muttered to himself. Ah, it seems I'll have to work even harder from now on. My fellow Hokage can't be too bad. Teacher Tobirama. Hiruzen Sarutobi stepped forward, his voice calm. Regardless of what the sky reveals, I will remain focused on the task at hand. Peace talks are imminent, please allow me to continue as the vanguard scout. Danzo Shimura suddenly looked up. Hiruzen. You. Danzo. Tobirama Senju interrupted him, his voice cold and stern. Be mindful of your position and the occasion. Danzo Shimura shuddered and lowered his head, but his trembling shoulders betrayed his inner excitement. Tobirama Senju sighed inwardly. Danzo, still haven't you noticed the difference? Hiruzen's first reaction was to focus on missions and responsibilities, while you only saw status and power. That's why I chose Hiruzen instead of you. But he couldn't say it. As a teacher, and as the future second Hokage, he had to give every student a chance. Keep going. Tobirama Senju gave the order. We'll discuss the matter of the heavenly curtain after we arrive in the land of lightning. For now, focus on the peace negotiation mission. The team set off again, but the atmosphere was completely different. Everyone is thinking about that question. How would you evaluate the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi? Why evaluation? Why not introduction or praise? The word how carries a clear judgmental tone, as if the future third Hokage did something during his tenure that needed to be evaluated and discussed. Tobirama Senju quickened his pace, his silver hair fluttering in the wind. He must complete the peace talks as soon as possible and return to Konoha. The effects of the celestial canopy may be more dangerous than any enemy. The third Hokage of Konoha ascended to the throne for the first time. After the First Shinobi World War ended, Hiruzen Sarutobi, who had recently become Hokage, stood by the window, looked at the sky, and let out a long sigh of relief. After the Kumagakure peace talks, he was appointed to succeed his teacher as the third Hokage in a time of crisis, facing both internal distrust and external threats. During this period, he barely slept, dealing with mountains of documents and the complex situation within the village. But now, the sky has appeared. It says third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. What does that mean? This means that his position as Hokage has been certified in some way. Regardless of where this certification came from or what its purpose was, at least in the eyes of ordinary people and most ninjas, Hiruzen Sarutobi was destined to become the third Hokage. This will reduce opposition, make it easier to implement his policies, and allow Konoha, which has just experienced turmoil, to stabilize more quickly. But Hiruzen Sarutobi lit his pipe and took a deep drag. How would you evaluate this question? He recalled what his teacher, Tobirama Senju, had once told him. Hiruzen, being Hokage means you will have to make many difficult decisions. Some decisions may only be judged as right or wrong much later. Some decisions may never have a right answer. At the time, he didn't quite understand the deeper meaning of those words, but now, looking at the judgmental question on the sky, he understands it a little better. Every decision the Hokage makes is scrutinized under the spotlight. Protecting the village might mean sacrificing individuals, maintaining peace might mean compromising and backing down, and nurturing the future might mean condoning mistakes. I will do my best. Hiruzen Sarutobi spoke softly to the sky. Regardless of the evaluation, I will make the choice that is most beneficial to Konoha. Inside a quiet house in Konoha village, Minato Uzumaki, wife of Hashirama Senju, the god of shinobi, and the renowned Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, breathed a sigh of relief. It seems the monkey won't need my help for the time being. As long as Konoha doesn't descend into chaos, I will definitely help Hashirama protect the village. Konoha 60 years Naruto era. The third Hokage was definitely a great Hokage. Naruto answered without hesitation, his voice loud and firm. He stood on the streets of Konoha, hands on his hips, looking up at the sky with undisguised admiration on his face. Sakura next to him nodded in agreement. Yes, the third Hokage has always taken good care of us. Although he's the Hokage, he's never been arrogant. Sasuke, hands in his pockets, said calmly, he truly sacrificed a lot for Konoha. Although his voice was calm, those familiar with him could hear the approval in it. Kakashi was the only one who didn't speak. He leaned against the wall, his right eye gazing at the sky with a complex expression. He remembered many things. Thinking of his father, the White Fang of Konoha, committing suicide, thinking of Obito's death, thinking of Rin's fate, thinking of the Uchiha clan's massacre. What was the third Hokage's role in these events? What choice did he make? Were those choices right or wrong? Kakashi didn't know. All he knew was that sitting in the Hokage's position often meant having to choose between something bad and something even worse. Regardless of which side is chosen, someone will get hurt. Kakashi-sensei, why aren't you saying anything? Naruto turned his head and asked in confusion. Don't you think my third-generation grandfather was good? Kakashi shook his head and reached out to ruffle Naruto's hair. No, he was an excellent Hokage. Only. The word Hokage itself carries a heavy connotation. Naruto seemed to understand, but he didn't ask any further questions. Instead, he continued to look up at the sky, waiting for what would happen next. Meanwhile, throughout the ninja world, Mount Maiboku, Jiraiya stood before the Toad Oil waterfall, gazing at the reflection of the sky in the water. The roar of the waterfall could not drown out the voice within his heart. Old man! He muttered to himself, remembering the old man who always smoked a pipe, nagged, and scolded him while cleaning up his messes after he got into trouble. He recalled Orochimaru's defection and Tsunade's departure. You must be tired, old man. Jiraiya said softly. Once I bring the child of prophecy back, you can finally rest. Short Book Street. Tsunade downed the drink in her glass in one gulp, then slammed the glass down on the table. Shizune looked at her with concern, hesitating to speak. How to evaluate? Tsunade gave a cold laugh, her expression complex, but ultimately remained silent. Sound Village. Orochimaru stood in the laboratory, looking at the celestial image projected onto the wall through a technique. Teacher. He stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. Almost there, almost there. I'll make sure you get a proper final verdict. His voice echoed in the shadows of the laboratory, carrying an indescribable meaning. Chapter 4. Throughout the entire ninja world, countless eyes were fixed on the sky. The screen flickered, the sound continued, and the subtitles appeared. From assuming the position of Hokage in a time of crisis to his death in the Battle of Konoha 60, Hiruzen Sarutobi's reign lasted for 31 years. Even excluding the brief one-year reign of the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, his reign still lasted 30 years, making him the longest reigning, most influential and most controversial Hokage in history. Minato Namikaze's report slipped from his hand, scattering papers all over the floor. He stood there, his blue eyes fixed on the words on the sky, the usual gentle smile on his face completely gone. The air in the office seemed to freeze, with only the faint sounds of village commotion drifting in from outside the window. 1 year. He repeated it softly, his voice filled with disbelief and bewilderment. He had only been Hokage for 3 months, and every day he was thinking about 5-year plans and 10-year strategies, how to lead Konoha into a new era, and how to fulfill the promises he had made to Kushina, his teacher, and the entire village. But now, this inexplicably appearing celestial curtain tells him, your term is only 1 year. That's impossible. Minato Namikaze shook his head, but his voice lacked confidence. The door was flung open, and Kushina Uzumaki rushed in, her long red hair slightly disheveled from running. After she entered, Minato Namikaze's calm, thoughtful expression vanished, replaced by a genuine smile. Clearly, they were happy about Kushina Uzumaki's quick arrival. Watergate. Kushina Uzumaki quickly stepped forward and grabbed his hand. Kushina, don't worry. We don't know if what that thing in the sky is true or false. Minato Namikaze affectionately stroked Kushina's forehead. Kushina gripped his hand tightly, wanting to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. She could only turn her head to look at the glaring subtitles on the sky and the aged portrait of Hiruzen Sarutobi. Her mind raced, and her brow furrowed deeper and deeper. If the term is only 1 year. Kushina's voice lowered, trembling slightly. That means something big is going to happen. Either you resign voluntarily, but that's unlikely, you're not the type to easily abandon responsibility. Either it is. She didn't finish speaking, but Minato Namikaze understood. He either dies or loses his ability to serve as Hokage. A suffocating silence fell over the Hokage's office. A few seconds later, Minato took a deep breath and grasped his wife's hand in return. When he looked up again, the confusion in his eyes had faded, replaced by a familiar determination. Even if it's only for 1 year. Minato said, his voice steady. I also want to do as much as possible this year. Shikaku. Nara Shikaku, who had been standing by the door, was also shocked by the information. 4th generation. Immediately adjust the work plan and prioritize the most urgent reform projects. Minato walked to the desk and ran his fingers over the documents on the surface. The Ninja Academy curriculum reform, the mission allocation system reform, and the communication mechanism with the major clans, these things can't wait any longer. Furthermore, we must strengthen patrols in the village, since unforeseen circumstances may arise in the future, we must take preventative measures in advance. Watergate. Kushina looked at him with concern. Minato turned to his wife, giving her a gentle yet bitter smile. No matter what the future holds, I am still the Hokage now. As long as I remain in this position, I must fulfill my duties. He looked out the window at the prosperous Konoha village, at the villagers walking on the streets, and at his own statue on the Hokage rock in the distance. And, he added softly, even if it's true, as long as this thing in the sky keeps leaking information and knows the future, we can change it. On the screen, the scene shifts. The somber and melancholic background music suddenly begins, the melody slow and heavy, each note seemingly striking the viewer's heart. Whether they were ninjas on the battlefield, farmers in the fields, or old people and children in villages, everyone involuntarily held their breath. The image became clearer. The second Hokage, Tobirama Senju, suddenly appeared in the sky. His expression was calm, but his next words shocked the ninja world. Monkey, starting tomorrow you're Hokage. Time seemed to stand still at that moment. On the sky, the expression on the young Hiruzen Sarutobi's face froze. His eyes widened, his mouth slightly agape, and he froze on the spot. Not only him, but also Shimura Danzo, Uchiha Kagami, and the others beside him showed expressions of shock. Take good care of those who admire the village and trust you. 60 years in Konoha, deep within its roots. In the dimly lit room, Shimura Danzo slammed his cane heavily onto the ground, making a dull thud. His eyes, exposed outside the bandages, were fixed on the sky refracted through the magic, memories from decades ago surging within them. That was the day. That was around that time. That's that cowardly version of myself. In that valley, when Tobirama said, Monkey, starting tomorrow you will be Hokage, he felt his world collapse. Why should I? Danzo murmured softly, his voice hoarse from suppressed emotions. The images on the sky stirred up all the memories he had buried deep inside. That day, the 6 of them were forced to evacuate, leaving Tobirama-sensei alone to cover their retreat. During the retreat, he could hear explosions and shouts of battle behind him, and he could feel the intense fluctuations of his teacher's chakra, and then, he suddenly disappeared. When they were finally safe, Hiruzen sat silently on the ground, his hands covering his head. At that moment, Danzo felt no sadness, only anger at his teacher, anger at Hiruzen, and anger at fate. But it's okay. Danzo slowly raised his head, his face full of sinister intent, and said hatefully. According to what's shown on the screen, Hiruzen won't be Hokage anymore at the latest next year. Next year will be Konoha year 61, Hiruzen's last year as Hokage. Currently, Orochimaru has defected, Jiraiya is away from home for many years, Tsunade has been away from Konoha for many years, and Hiruzen has almost no reliable successor by his side. Wait until that time. Danzo muttered to himself, his fingers lightly tapping his cane. The Hokage will ultimately be mine. Konoha Year 1. Madara Uchiha gazed at the image in the sky and slowly closed his eyes. As expected, the second Hokage wasn't me. Tobirama Senju. Tobirama Senju. Despite being mentally prepared, I still couldn't accept this uncertain future when I witnessed it firsthand. Countless thoughts echoed in Madara Uchiha's mind, carrying a deep sense of loss. Now, he deeply regrets signing the peace treaty with the Senju clan. Some things seem unavoidable. Chapter 5. Konoha, Year 20, Land of Lightning. The real-life forest bears a striking resemblance to the terrain depicted in the video. Tobirama Senju raised his hand, signaling the group to stop, and looked around with a grim expression. His 6 students gathered around, awaiting instructions. But Tobirama Senju did not immediately issue the order, instead, he looked up at the sky. The footage that just played, that scene, that point in time. Too close. They look so alike. Familiar terrain, familiar weather, familiar team composition, and an ominous premonition. Teacher. Hiruzen Sarutobi cautiously surveyed his surroundings. Is there something going on? Tobirama Senju did not answer. His mind raced, comparing the reality before him with the images on the sky. The same 7-person team, most likely the same mission. If the sky is displaying the true future, what will happen next? He will die during these peace talks. He will appoint Hiruzen as the next Hokage here, and then cover the rear alone. This conclusion weighed heavily on Tobirama Senju's heart, but he showed no emotion on his face. As the second Hokage and the leader of this team, he had to maintain absolute composure. Everyone, listen to my command. Tobirama Senju spoke, his voice steady and powerful. The 6 students immediately straightened up. Task changed. Tobirama Senju continued. You 6, return to Konoha immediately, at top speed. Torifu, you're in charge of scouting ahead. Kagami, focus on sensory tracking. Danzo, Koharu, you're responsible for the flanks and rear. Hiruzen, you're in overall command. Young Hiruzen Sarutobi was stunned. Teacher, and you? I will travel to the Land of Lightning alone to complete the peace talks. Tobirama Senju interrupted him. With the Flying Thunder God technique, my safety is not a problem. Your mission is to ensure a safe return and bring the information back to Konoha. He paused, his gaze sweeping across each student's face. Now that we know the potential dangers ahead, there's no need for unnecessary sacrifices. This is my judgment, and also my order. A brief commotion broke out in the group. The eyes of young Shimura Danzo lit up. If the teacher had changed his plans and hadn't stayed behind to cover the retreat alone, the Hokage's succession wouldn't have happened at that critical moment. Since the succession didn't occur, the inevitability of Hiruzen becoming Hokage was broken. The future has changed. Danzo could barely contain his elation. This means he still has a chance, and that the Hokage position is no longer Hiruzen's for the taking. As long as he can prove that he is better than Hiruzen and more suitable. Teacher, this is too dangerous. The young Hiruzen's voice interrupted Danzo's thoughts. Even with the Flying Thunder God technique, venturing alone into enemy territory would be. Hiruzen. Tobirama Senju looked at him with deep eyes. Now, you are in charge of this team, and I need you to lead everyone back safely. This is a more important task than my personal safety, understand? Young Hiruzen gritted his teeth, but finally nodded. Clear. But the worry in his eyes did not diminish. His concern wasn't whether the Hokage position would change, but rather his teacher's safety. Even with the Flying Thunder God technique, there is still a certain degree of danger in venturing alone into the land of lightning to complete peace talks. But he understood even more clearly that if they insisted on staying, they would only be a burden to their teacher. Then let's go. Tobirama Senju said no more. The 6 students acted swiftly and began evacuating as instructed. Before turning away, Danzo gave his teacher a deep look, a look that contained gratitude, ambition, and a certain determination. Tobirama Senju nodded to him, signaling him to hurry up and leave. As the 6 figures disappeared at the other end of the forest, Tobirama Senju stood alone in the same spot. He looked up at the sky, where the image had changed to something else, analyzing the future third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. But Tobirama Senju's mind wasn't on those analyses. Will his decision change the future? Will it change the history of Konoha? Will it change his own fate? He didn't know. But he knew one thing: as Hokage, as a teacher, he had a responsibility to protect those who trusted him. If his death is inevitable in the future revealed by the sky, then at least he must ensure that this death is meaningful, rather than being a choice forced upon him during a future siege. Tobirama Senju formed hand seals, and the next second, his silver-haired figure vanished from the valley. The celestial canopy still hangs in the air, continuing to reveal fragments of the future. But from this moment on, the future of this time and space has begun to change. On the celestial screen, the sound and images continued. The painting features a close-up of Hiruzen Sarutobi. He was clad in armor, his hands adjusting his wrist guards, 2 hair ribbons fluttering in the wind, and his eyes sharp as an eagle's. Below, we will evaluate the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, from 5 aspects: strength, domestic affairs, diplomacy, education, and military. Upon hearing this, people from countless timelines throughout the ninja world instinctively held their breath. Especially in those timelines still ruled by Hiruzen Sarutobi, commoners, ninjas, nobles, spies, everyone looked up, their eyes fixed on the curtain of light stretching across the sky. Konoha village is the most powerful ninja village in the ninja world, a fact no one questions. And as the highest leader of this village, Hiruzen Sarutobi can be said to be the most powerful person in the ninja world without exaggeration. Now that something beyond our comprehension is going to evaluate him, it's naturally attracting attention. Interesting. Hidden Mist Village. The 5th Mizukage, Mei Terumi, sat in her office, watching the celestial screen with her trusted confidants, including Ao and Kochuro, in an attempt to gather more intelligence. Publicly praising a foreign leader of film star caliber, the person behind that facade is either extremely ignorant or extremely overconfident. Hidden Cloud Village. The 4th Raikage slammed his fist on the table. Evaluate? Who gave them the right? If they dare to say anything good about that old BD Hiruzen Sarutobi, I'll be the first to disagree. Inoue Gakuer, Onaki, the 2-scaled scale, floats in midair with his arms crossed. Hiruzen Sarutobi. Humph, let me see what kind of evaluation you'll get. In the forest on the way to the land of lightning, Tobirama Senju, who was taking a break, leaned against a tree trunk and looked up at the sky. When he heard the 5 aspects of strength, domestic affairs, diplomacy, education, and military, he raised his eyebrows slightly. A very comprehensive evaluation system. Tobirama Senju murmured to himself. Indeed, to be a good Hokage, these 5 aspects are indispensable. Strength is the foundation, domestic affairs are the basis, diplomacy is the environment, education is the future, and military strength is the guarantee. So, how would Hiruzen be evaluated within this system? Is it excellent, satisfactory, barely passable, or unsatisfactory? Tobirama Senju continued on his way, but devoted some of his attention to the sky. He wanted to know what level his chosen successor was at in this unknown realm. Chapter 6. Strength Assessment. On the backdrop, the narration continued. Judging from his strength, Hiruzen Sarutobi was undoubtedly qualified to be Hokage. Konoha Year 60, Konoha Village. Hiruzen Sarutobi, his face covered in age spots, sat behind his desk. Hearing Tenmu's evaluation, a smug smile spread across his face. He picked up his pipe, took a deep drag, then gently blew out the smoke and let out a sigh of relief. Is it up to standard? He muttered to himself. A fairly fair assessment. Although it's only qualified rather than excellent, considering the evaluator's potentially high standards, this evaluation is already quite good. Hiruzen Sarutobi put down his teacup, looked out the window, and continued to listen attentively to the sky's comments about him. Meanwhile, at the training ground, Class 7 is resting in the open space. Of course. Naruto put his hands on his hips and shouted loudly at the sky. My grandfather, the third Hokage, was the strongest Hokage. He knew all kinds of ninjutsu, he was incredibly powerful. Sakura nodded in agreement. Yes, everyone says the third Hokage was proficient in all 5 chakra nature transformations, he was a professor of ninjutsu. Sasuke stood with his hands in his pockets, saying nothing, but his expression was full of approval. Kakashi leaned against the tree trunk, his right eye glancing at the excited Naruto, his lips twitching slightly. The strongest Hokage. Kakashi sighed inwardly, but remained silent. Some facts are better left for young people to discover for themselves. The video continued playing on the screen. He possessed a comprehensive mastery of all existing ninjutsu in Konoha, and was proficient in all chakra transformations and ninjutsu of the 5 chakra natures, earning him the title of Professor of Ninjutsu. Screen transition. This time, it's a battle scene, and the background seems to be a rooftop in Konoha Village. The elderly Hiruzen Sarutobi wore the Hokage robes, and his hands moved swiftly, forming hand seals with fluid, effortless grace. First, he squatted down and patted the ground. Earth release, earth flowing river. The roof tiles instantly transformed into a muddy torrent, sweeping towards the first and second Hokage. Almost simultaneously, he maintained earth release with his left hand while simultaneously forming a hand seal with his right. Earth release, earth dragon bullet. Fire release, fire dragon bullet. The earth dragon and the fire dragon merged, transforming into scorching lava projectiles that covered the entire battlefield. Immediately afterwards, he took a deep breath, his chest expanding, and then fire release, fire dragon flame bullet. Blazing flames spewed from his mouth, shooting out in a torrent that left his opponents with no way to escape. So strong. On the training field, Naruto stared wide-eyed, his eyes filled with admiration. Sasuke stared intently at the screen, trying to record every detail of the hand seals and the flow of chakra. Switching between 5 attributes with ease, seamlessly connecting ninjutsu. Is this the third Hokage's true strength? Sakura, on the other hand, focused on tactics. The third Hokage was so calm. He first used earth release to restrict his opponent's movement, then attacked with a combination of ninjutsu, and finally covered the area with a wide-range fire release. He was truly amazing. But Kakashi's expression grew increasingly serious. The third generation's rival. Orochimaru aside, the other 2 figures were simply unbelievable. Bang! The Hokage's office. Recovering from his shock, Hiruzen Sarutobi slammed his fist on the desk, his hand still gripping his pipe, and trembled violently, unable to calm down for a long time. He stared at the 2 familiar figures in the sky, his eyes flashing with anger and pain. Impure world reincarnation? It should be Orochimaru. He murmured the name, his voice filled with complex emotions. Hiruzen Sarutobi quickly realized that what was being projected onto the screen was definitely the future, and not just any future. Because my appearance in the picture is exactly the same as it is now. Considering what Tianmu said about his term of office, this battle should take place soon, at most no later than Konoha 61. Hiruzen Sarutobi stood up and walked to the window. Orochimaru, you finally decided to attack Konoha. Unlike the future, this time, he knew in advance. Hiruzen Sarutobi took a deep breath, suppressing the turmoil in his heart. The sky reveals the future, this is the opportunity. If Orochimaru really plans to attack Konoha within a year, then there is still time to prepare. Someone come here. Hiruzen Sarutobi said in a deep voice. A member of the Secret Service appeared in the office in an instant. The third-generation adult. Inform Danzo and his advisors to come to my office after the content in the heavens is finished. Also. Hiruzen Sarutobi paused. Strengthen surveillance of Orochimaru's movements. Also, have the leaders of the sealing team and the barrier team attend the meeting. Yes. After the ANBU ninja disappeared, Hiruzen Sarutobi looked up at the sky again. Looking at the lifeless faces of the first and second generations, a sharp pain welled up in his heart. Teacher, I'm sorry. He said softly. I failed to teach Orochimaru properly, and I couldn't stop him from going astray. But this time, I won't let him succeed. Otagaku Village, Underground Base. Orochimaru sat at the lab table, his golden vertical pupils fixed on the battle scene on the sky. Has the surprise for the teacher been exposed just like that? He stuck out his long tongue and licked his lips, but there was little surprise in his eyes. But it's okay. Even if the teacher finds out, what can they do? Oh teacher, you're always like this. Orochimaru spoke softly, as if he were talking to Hiruzen Sarutobi. Always wanting to protect everyone, always wanting things to stay the same, always choosing the safest path. It's time to let the windmills turn. He looked at the elderly yet still fighting figure in the sky, a hint of disdain flashing in his eyes. Let me show you just how powerful this forbidden technique you've been preventing me from researching really is. Impure world reincarnation, this is just the beginning. Somewhere in the ninja world, at a hot spring inn. Jiraiya was soaking in the hot spring, his long white hair floating on the surface of the water. He looked up at the image on the sky, and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. Old man. He murmured, watching the figure of the teacher fighting against both the first and second generations simultaneously in the scene. You're so old, why are you still working so hard? He recalled the scene when he was a child, and Hiruzen-sensei taught him ninjutsu step by step. Back then, the teacher was young and energetic, able to mentor 3 problem students at the same time himself, Orochimaru, and Tsunade. That Orochimaru guy actually attacked the old man. Jiraiya clenched his fist, and the hot spring water rippled as his body moved. Looks like I need to speed things up. Where exactly is the child of prophecy? He got up and left the hot spring, quickly dried himself off, and changed his clothes. The future revealed by the sky gave him a sense of urgency. If Orochimaru really attacks Konoha next year. If that really was the teacher's last battle. I must go back. Jiraiya made a decision. At least for that moment, I want to be by my teacher's side. Tanbu Street, outside the casino. Tsunade slammed her fist into the wall, and instantly the wall cracked open with spider web-like fissures. Shizuan, holding Tuntun, took a step back in fright. Orochimaru. Tsunade's roar drew the attention of everyone on the street. How dare you do this? How dare they use the impure world reincarnation technique to summon Grandpa and second Grandpa? Lady Tsunade, please calm down. He advised quietly. How can I stay calm? Tsunade turned around, her eyes burning with rage. Orochimaru clearly knows what this means to me. Return to Konoha. Tsunade suddenly spoke, her voice as cold as ice. Let's go now. But Lady Tsunade, your illness. I said, let's go back to Konoha. Tsunade interrupted her, her gaze terrifyingly resolute. If Orochimaru really dares to come, I'll personally crush every single bone in his body. Chapter 7. The high platform outside Konoha village in the first year of its existence. Madara Uchiha looked at the battle scene on the sky with disdain. Is this all the strength that Sarutobi kid has? Madara Uchiha snorted coldly. Switching between 5 elemental ninjutsu, is this what you call a ninjutsu professor? Hashirama, it seems Konoha has no successor. Hashirama Senju did not answer immediately. He stared at the himself summoned on the sky, his brow furrowed. That self had empty eyes and stiff movements, and was not in a living state at all. Tobirama. Hashirama Senju's voice deepened, tinged with rare anger. What have you figured out? He turned to look at his younger brother, his eyes stern. I told you long ago, don't study those dangerous forbidden techniques. Look, the impure world reincarnation, it desecrates the dead, forcing the souls of the dead to return to the mortal world to fight. This is the greatest disrespect for life. Tobirama Senju stood to the side, his expression also not looking good beneath his silver hair. Madara Uchiha watched the brothers' argument with a cold eye, but his mind was elsewhere. The strength that Hiruzen Sarutobi displayed on the sky might seem impressive to ordinary ninjas, but compared to those at Hashirama's level, it was merely acceptable. 5 elemental ninjutsu? His battle with Hashirama had long surpassed the level of ninjutsu attribute advantage. But Madara Uchiha's gaze fell upon Hiruzen Sarutobi's fighting style. This junior has a decent tactical mind. Facing a strong opponent, he can calmly analyze the situation and make reasonable use of ninjutsu combinations to buy time. At least, he's not a fool. This is the highest praise he could give. Hashirama Senju also felt a heavy weight in his heart. The glimpses of the future revealed by the celestial curtain showed him the potential crisis facing Konoha. Furthermore, Hiruzen Sarutobi can summon the Monkey King, and his close combat abilities are also considerable. He can be considered a master of conventional ninjutsu, a pinnacle that ordinary people without bloodline limits or Jinchuriki cannot reach. His strength is formidable among cage-level ninjas. Orochimaru, also a cage-level ninja, personally admitted that if Hiruzen Sarutobi had wanted to, he could have instantly killed him when he defected. The visuals, accompanied by text, transitioned to a completely new battle scene, still the rooftops of Konoha, but this time, Hiruzen Sarutobi is accompanied by a giant ape. The monkey transformed into a Vajra staff, which Hiruzen Sarutobi wielded, and in close combat, he actually forced the first and second Hokage back several steps. However, Tianmu's tone shifted. However, lacking a decisive finishing move and groundbreaking power, he struggles to cope with threats exceeding his capabilities. Among all the Hokage, he is at the bottom level and far from deserving the title of strongest Hokage. Strength rating, A+, peak shadow level. When this final rating appeared, the entire ninja world fell into a brief silence. Ah! Naruto scratched his head, his face full of confusion. The third Hokage wasn't the strongest Hokage? But everyone says so. In his mind, the term strongest Hokage was almost synonymous with the third Hokage. School textbooks, villagers' conversations, and even some propaganda materials all emphasize the third Hokage's reputation as the strongest. Sakura also showed a surprised expression. I never imagined that the third Hokage, who was rated so highly, would actually be considered one of the weakest among all the Hokage. Just how strong were the first, second, and fourth Hokage? She instinctively looked at Kakashi, hoping her Jonin mentor would offer some explanation. Uchiha Sasuke did not participate in the discussion. Instead, he lowered his head, put his hands in his pockets, and frowned. He grasped another key word. Movie level. Sasuke muttered to himself. What kind of rating system is this? Is it only when you reach this level that you can be called a shadow? He recalled what Tianmu had mentioned, that Hiruzen Sarutobi was at the peak of cage level, and Orochimaru was also cage level. The fact that the third Hokage could instantly defeat Orochimaru means that there is a huge gap between different cage levels. So, what level is that man's strength? Sasuke unconsciously clenched his fist, his nails digging into his palm. He recalled that night of the blood moon, and the figure of that man who so casually slaughtered his entire clan. To be able to single-handedly wipe out the Uchiha clan at the age of 13, one definitely possesses cage-level strength. The question is, where would one rank within the cage level? Sasuke gritted his teeth, frustrated by his own weakness. Kakashi leaned against the tree trunk, his right eye peeking out as he looked at the ratings displayed on the sky, his thoughts becoming increasingly complex. A+, peak shadow level. Kakashi repeated this assessment to himself. He didn't know what A and meant, but the description of it as the pinnacle of shadow level was probably quite accurate. The third Hokage's strength indeed reached the limit of a regular ninja. He was proficient in all 5 elemental ninjutsu, summoning jutsu, sealing jutsu, taijutsu, and had almost no weaknesses. He thought of his father, Hatake Sakumo, the man known as Konoha's White Fang. What level of power does the father possess? It must have reached the level of a film star, right? However, he has no bloodline limit, nor is he a Jinchuriki, he relies solely on his swordsmanship and combat intelligence. Pity. Kakashi shook his head, dismissing the thought. He was more concerned with another piece of information. Last among all Hokage. There have been 4 Hokage so far, it seems the future Hokage will be very strong too. Kakashi thought of his teacher, Minato Namikaze, the man known as the Yellow Flash. If the third Hokage is the pinnacle of cage-level skill, then what level is Minato-sensei? He also thought of Jiraiya, Tsunade, these legendary Sunin-level powerhouses should also be within the cage-level range. The power system in the ninja world is surprisingly clear. Kakashi muttered to himself. However, the gap between 2 cage-level ninjas might be even greater than the gap between a Jonin and a cage-level ninja. The Hokage's office. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat behind his desk, looking at the evaluation displayed on the screen. When he first heard the pinnacle that ordinary people can reach and considered formidable among the shadow level, a gratified smile appeared on his aged face. He felt this assessment was very fair. He has spent his entire life cultivating, without any bloodline limit or tailed beast empowerment, relying solely on his mastery of ninjutsu and his ultimate control over chakra. He's already quite satisfied with what he's achieved. But when he heard Orochimaru admit that he could have killed him instantly, Hiruzen Sarutobi's smile gradually faded. He remembered that night. Orochimaru's laboratory was discovered, and it was filled with evidence of human experimentation. He went there in person to face one of his most prized disciples. Orochimaru did not resist, he simply stood there, calmly looking at himself. "Teacher, are you going to kill me?" Orochimaru asked that question at the time. Hiruzen Sarutobi remembered gripping the Vajra staff tightly, remembered his chakra boiling within him, and remembered that for a fleeting moment he did have murderous intent. For the sake of the village's rules, and for the sake of those innocent lives used in experiments. But in the end, he couldn't bring himself to do it and allowed Orochimaru to escape, thus becoming a rogue ninja. Now, Tianmu says that if he had used his full power back then, he could have instantly killed Orochimaru. Hiruzen Sarutobi closed his eyes. Yes, he can. However, he did not regret it. Hiruzen Sarutobi opened his eyes, his gaze returning to calm. If I had to choose again, I would probably make the same decision. But when Tianmu said that he was far from being worthy of the title of the strongest Hokage, a rare blush appeared on the old man's face. Cough cough. He coughed a few times and touched his beard somewhat awkwardly. The title of strongest Hokage does indeed have an element of promotion. As the longest-serving Hokage, and a leader who experienced 3 shinobi world wars, the village needed such a symbol, a powerful, wise, and invincible leader. This can both deter foreign enemies and stabilize public morale. Never mind. Hiruzen Sarutobi finally shook his head with a wry smile. Being exposed so publicly by Tenbu was indeed a blow to his pride. Chapter 8. Konoha Year 37, Konoha Village. Hiruzen Sarutobi, in the prime of his life, stood atop the Hokage Rock, overlooking the prosperous Hidden Leaf village below. He had only recently taken over as Hokage, and the village was recovering from the First Shinobi World War and was developing rapidly. He listened attentively to the comments displayed on the screen. The pinnacle that ordinary people can reach. The middle-aged man nodded. I don't have a bloodline limit, so receiving this evaluation is truly remarkable. If you're not born with a bloodline limit, it's very difficult to obtain one in this lifetime. The Sharingan of the Uchiha clan and the Byakugan of the Hyuga clan are innate talents. Ordinary ninjas can only catch up through hard work. The young Hiruzen had a clear understanding of his current strength. He had indeed reached the Kage level and was not weak among the Kage of the 5 great nations. But to say the strongest? It's still a long way off. At least he knew that the 3rd Raikage of Kumagakure and the 2 scales of Uegakure, Onaki, were no weaker than him. But the middle-aged Hiruzen frowned. Is Orochimaru going to defect in the future? This is the information he cares about most. Orochimaru was his most prized disciple, whose talent even surpassed that of Jiraiya and Tsunade. If even a disciple like this would defect, how much of a failure does that show for him as a teacher? And in the end, I softened and didn't kill him. The middle-aged man muttered to himself as he slashed at the sun. I wonder what my future self will think. After all, if it were now, he would not hesitate to kill Orochimaru with his own hands. The middle-aged Hiruzen thought of Orochimaru now. Although he appeared cold on the outside, he was still a kind young man at heart, and his heart was filled with the will of fire. It must be changed. He made up his mind to kill the man in his prime. Besides stabilizing the village, there's something else I need to do, properly train Orochimaru, find out the reasons for his future defection, and then resolve them. Konoha 48th Year. Minato Namikaze sat at his desk, his hands crossed and resting on his chin, his azure eyes fixed on the sky. Kushina Uzumaki sat opposite him, but she was clearly not interested in the conversation, her mind preoccupied with Minato's 1-year term. A+, peak shadow level. A very reasonable assessment. The 3rd Hokage truly reached the pinnacle of conventional ninjutsu. Minato Namikaze fell into deep thought, but what concerned him more was the information about Orochimaru. Orochimaru is going to defect. When did the defection happen? Judging from the timeline, it should have been in the last few years. He recalled for a moment. According to the report from the Dark Division, Orochimaru's recent whereabouts are indeed somewhat suspicious. He often goes out for long periods of time, and his entry and exit records from the laboratory are also abnormal. However, because Orochimaru was a disciple of the 3rd Hokage and one of the legendary Sunin, no one dared to investigate further. Did I die during Orochimaru's defection? While Orochimaru possesses exceptional survival skills, it's not accurate to say he could pose a fatal threat to himself. Minato Namikaze considered this possibility, but then shook his head. He has a clear understanding of his own abilities. The Flying Thunder God technique made him almost invincible, the Rasengan provided powerful attacks, and with Sage Mode and sealing techniques, he didn't believe Orochimaru could kill him. However, what exactly were Orochimaru's reasons for defecting? Minato Namikaze frowned. Human experimentation? Forbidden technique research? Or is there another reason? He knew Orochimaru had a morbid obsession with ninjutsu, but to what extent would this obsession lead to defection? But since he hasn't defected yet, I can't make a move. Minato Namikaze made his decision. It seems the only option is to ask the 3rd Hokage to investigate. According to Tenbu, he can still easily defeat Orochimaru. He planned to go to the 3rd Hokage's residence after the video finished playing on the screen. In the first year of Konoha's reign, on a high platform outside the village, Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha stood side by side, their expressions somewhat subtle. The pinnacle that ordinary people can reach. Hashirama Senju stroked his chin. This assessment is quite interesting. It means that Hiruzen didn't rely on any bloodline limit or tailed beast, he reached the peak of cage level through his own efforts. He turned to look at Uchiha Madara. That's remarkable, isn't it? It proves that even without innate advantages, one can achieve great things through hard work. Madara Uchiha snorted coldly. But it also proves that his limits are there. Lack of a decisive killing move and breakthrough power, that's the tragedy of not having a bloodline limit. No matter how hard he tries, he can't break through the ceiling of his talent. Ban, you can't be so harsh. Hashirama Senju wanted to refute. I'm stating the facts. Madara Uchiha interrupted him. Look at the evaluation of sky cover, it is difficult to cope with threats beyond its specifications. What is the threat of overscaling? Nine-tailed fox? Or something even more powerful? Without bloodline limits or the power of tailed beasts, it would indeed be difficult to deal with a disaster of that magnitude using only conventional ninjutsu. Hashirama Senju fell silent, he knew Madara was right. With Wood Release and Madara's Mangekyo Sharingan, their strength had already surpassed the scope of conventional ninjutsu. But at least he tried, and he achieved a great deal. Hashirama Senju said this at the end. As Hokage, strength is only one aspect. The ability to govern the village, nurture the next generation, and maintain peace, these are equally important. Humph, say what you will. Madara Uchiha turned his head away. Another time and space. Tobirama Senju, residing within the land of lightning, was also pondering this. Movie level, A+. He muttered to himself. It seems that a complete system for evaluating strength has been developed in later generations. Judging from the description, the so-called A end should be the best among the cage level, but there should be even higher levels above that. He thought of Hashirama's Wood Release and Sage Mode, and Madara's Susanoo. These abilities likely go beyond the scope of conventional ninjutsu. I just don't know what level Big Brother and Madara would be according to this system. Tobirama Senju analyzed. And I myself, should be a bit stronger than a monkey. He has a clear understanding of his own abilities. Although he is not as strong as Hashirama Senju or Madara Uchiha, he is stronger than other cage-level shinobi. However, what bothered him was the assessment that Hiruzen Sarutobi was the weakest of all the Hokage, which meant that the subsequent Hokage were likely to maintain considerable strength. But this is also a good thing. Senju Tobirama thought to himself. If each Hokage is weaker than the last, then Konoha will truly be in danger. At least for now, the future Hokage are all above average. That's enough. Of course, other ninja villages in various timelines also highly recognized Hiruzen Sarutobi's strength. Their only concern was, just how strong would the future Hokage of Konoha be? Chapter 9. Second item, Domestic Policy Evaluation. The voice from the sky rang out again, and people throughout countless timelines of the ninja world involuntarily sat up straight and held their breath. In particular, the major clans of Konoha, the Uchiha clan which had not yet been wiped out, the cautious Hyuga clan, and even the Inoshikacho trio who had a good relationship with the Sarutobi clan, were not prepared to let any information slip by. Fugaku Uchiha even summoned his eldest son, Itachi Uchiha, to his side, preparing to instruct him based on the content of the celestial screen. After all, judging from the previous assessment of strength, the information revealed by the sky curtain was likely true. Now, it was assessing the internal affairs capabilities of Konoha's supreme leader. This involves the distribution of power, the allocation of resources, and the support of the people. Every word could affect the current political landscape of the village. Hiruzen Sarutobi succeeded to the Hokage position amidst a crisis, when Konoha was still rife with internal divisions and surrounded by powerful external enemies. Upon assuming office, he continued the policy established by the second Hokage, Tobirama Senju, supporting the common people and maintaining a balance of power with the powerful clans. The image, accompanied by text, depicts the middle-aged Hiruzen Sarutobi standing in front of the window of the Hokage's office. Outside the window is the somewhat desolate Konoha village after the war, and in the distance, only the statues of the first and second Hokage remain on the Hokage Rock, while his place is still blank. On one hand, he expanded the recruitment of commoner children into the Ninja Academy, breaking down blood ties and allowing the will of fire to take root in a wider area. On the other hand, he used task allocation and resource distribution as leverage to gently balance the power of various ninja clans, maintaining the facade of the Konoha community. Under his leadership, Konoha remained the strongest ninja village in the ninja world, and he was known as a ninja hero. This is what is meant by enlightenment. Screen transition. The classrooms of the Ninja Academy were filled with children, many of whom were dressed in simple civilian clothes. At the mission posting area, ninjas from various clans and civilian ninjas were mixed into teams. In front of the resource warehouse, the leaders of the Hyuga, Uchiha, Sarutobi, and other clans were orderly receiving supplies. Finally, there's the image of Hiruzen Sarutobi standing atop the Hokage Rock, overlooking the village, the sunlight bathing him, giving him a commanding presence. The Land of Thunder. When Tobirama Senju heard that Hiruzen Sarutobi had continued his domestic policies, a rare satisfied smile appeared on his usually serious face. It seems Hiruzen understands my philosophy. Giving talented commoners the opportunity to rise to prominence, and preventing any single ninja clan from becoming too powerful, this is the foundation for Konoha's long-term peace and stability. He recalled the policies he had implemented over the years, establishing the Ninja Academy system, reforming the Anbu system, standardizing the mission allocation process. Every step was aimed at strengthening the Hokage's power, weakening the clan's monopoly, and reinforcing the village's collective consciousness. In retrospect, Hiruzen not only inherited these policies, but also continued them very well. However, Tobirama Senju felt a vague unease. Does the phrase "the Konoha community" on the surface mean that they are not actually united? Meanwhile, in another timeline, Fugaku Uchiha, who was preparing to instruct his eldest son, did not look too pleased. Support the common people and keep the ninja clans in check. He repeated those 8 words softly, but his face remained expressionless, clearly demonstrating that, as the head of a clan, he had cultivated considerable self-control. After the Senju clan retired, the largest ninja clan in Konoha was the Uchiha. As for the Hyuga and other clans, it wasn't that Fugaku looked down on them, but rather that they were truly incompetent. However, it's no wonder that the Uchiha clan became the target of everyone's attacks and was constantly targeted. Damn Tobirama Senju! The elders of the clan are right, the root of the problem lies with him. Hiruzen Sarutobi, in the prime of his life, looked somewhat embarrassed upon hearing Tenbu's assessment of his domestic policies. It directly revealed my thoughts. He touched his nose and gave a wry smile. At least the evaluation is positive, the title Endurance Hero sounds good. He walked to the window and looked down at the prosperous Konoha village. As Tianmu said, Konoha is currently in a delicate period of balance. On the surface, the major clans are harmonious, but they are constantly engaging in underhanded maneuvers. The number of commoner ninjas is increasing, but high-ranking positions are still controlled by the clans. Externally, there are the Hidden Cloud Village and the Hidden Stone Village eyeing them covetously, while internally, there are various conflicts that need to be resolved. Supporting commoners and checking the power of powerful families. Hiruzen Sarutobi repeated these 8 words in a low voice. It is indeed what I should do. He recalled a recent high-level meeting where Shimura Danzo proposed strengthening surveillance of the Uchiha clan, while the Uchiha elders complained about unfair task allocation. His final decision was to increase surveillance of the Uchiha clan, but also to assign them more tasks. This is balance. Neither completely suppress nor completely indulge, but seek that delicate balance among all parties. However, the Konoha community on the surface. Hiruzen Sarutobi frowned. That's a rather harsh statement. He knew that Konoha was not a monolithic entity. There are various conflicts and clashes of interest between families and commoners, and even within families themselves. But he always believed that as long as the superficial unity was maintained, and as long as the shared ideal of will of fire remained, Konoha could continue on its path. Now that Tianmu has said that, it seems like I was deceiving myself. Hiruzen Sarutobi chuckled self-deprecatingly. But isn't that how village governance works? Often, maintaining a semblance of peace is more important than tearing down walls in pursuit of absolute justice. Balance is always necessary. Only in this way can he secure his position as Hokage. But the evaluation of Tianmu did not end there. After a brief pause, the calm voice rang out again, and what followed caused the atmosphere of the entire ninja world to change abruptly. However, as Hiruzen Sarutobi grew older, his art of balance gradually reached a more subtle and profound level. He won people's hearts with appeasement, yet tacitly allowed Danzo Shimura to spread his influence within the root organization. He championed the will of fire, yet deliberately ignored the Uchiha clan's growing decline, resorting only to isolation and surveillance to resolve their inner conflicts. He promoted talented commoners like Minato Namikaze, yet tolerated the elders' and advisors' control of power. Therefore, in the later stages of his reign, major crises erupted, including White Fang's suicide, the alienation of the three legendary Sunin, the Nine Tails attack, the Uchiha clan's massacre, and Orochimaru's defection. If Orochimaru hadn't ultimately killed him in battle, his reputation would likely have been extremely tarnished. This is what is meant by darkness. The visuals, combined with the text, begin to present a different picture. Sakumo Hataki's funeral, Jiraiya leaving Konoha, Tsunade's departure, the horrific scene of the Nine Tails Night, the bloodbath at the Uchiha clan's territory, Orochimaru's departing figure, and finally, the elderly Hiruzen standing alone on the Hokage rock, his back hunched and lonely. If Hokage were given posthumous titles, then Xianzong would be a fitting name for Hiruzen Sarutobi. As the saying goes, bright at the beginning, dark at the end, mysterious beyond mystery. Chapter 10. Uchiha Clan Territory, the clan head's residence. When Fugaku Uchiha heard Tenbu's assessment of the third Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi's mistakes, he couldn't help but nod slightly. That's exactly right. Fugaku Uchiha's voice was filled with resentment that had been suppressed for many years. If the Hokage hadn't taken sides, and if the higher UPS hadn't deliberately ostracized them, the Uchiha clan wouldn't be in this predicament. However, he immediately stopped speaking. As the voice from the heavens continued, it calmly delivered a devastating message. The Uchiha clan was massacred. These words exploded in Uchiha Fugaku's ears like a thunderclap. He stood up abruptly, overturning the cushion beneath him, and the teacup rolled to the ground with a crisp, jarring sound as it shattered. The tea stains spread out on the tatami mats, creating dark watermarks that looked just like blood. The scene on the screen switched at the right moment. Near the Uchiha clan's territory, there lay corpses dressed in Uchiha clan insignia, some male, some female, some old, some young, with blood spreading beneath them. The scene lasted only a second, but every detail was exceptionally clear in Fugaku Uchiha's eyes. Although the faces were somewhat blurry, Fugaku could still recognize them all. What angered him most was that the enemy hadn't even spared the children. Fugaku Uchiha's eyes instantly turned blood red, and his body trembled violently. No. Impossible. His voice was hoarse, forced out from between his teeth. It's all fake. But he dared not gamble with the lives of his entire clan on the fact that the sky was a lie. Moreover, he also tends to believe that this is a scene that will actually happen in the future. We just don't know who the enemy is. Chieftain. Grandpa Fugaku. The sound of hurried footsteps and shouts came from outside the mansion. The core members of the radical faction of the Uchiha clan, including the 8th Hokage, Inahi and Tetsuka, arrived almost simultaneously. They burst through the sliding door, their faces filled with rage. Did you see that? Tianmu said. Extermination of their entire clan. How dare they? The Konoha High Command. It must be them. The crowd was outraged. These Uchiha elites, who were already dissatisfied with the village's policies, now had bloodshot eyes, dozens of Sharingan eyes activated, and chakra surged in the room, making the air scorching. But all the sounds ceased abruptly upon seeing Fugaku Uchiha's face. Their chieftain stood with his back to them in front of the projection screen. Moonlight streamed in through the window, illuminating half of his face. The most shocking thing was the 2 lines of bloody tears slowly streaming down his face. That was no ordinary blood and tears. Blood beads slid down her cheeks, gathered at her chin, and dripped onto her clothes, spreading into dark red blotches. But everyone's eyes were fixed on Fugaku's eyes, those slowly rotating Sharingan eyes, which were no longer in the shape of Tomo. Instead, there are 3 interconnected Tai Chi symbols, forming a perfect triangular structure that slowly rotates deep within the eyeball. The yin and yang fish in each Tai Chi symbol are rotating, as if containing some profound power of reincarnation. Kaleidoscope Sharingan. The room was deathly silent. Uchiha Hakuho's mouth hung open, and the kunao in his hand clattered to the ground. Uchiha Inaisa took a half step back, his eyes filled with awe. Uchiha Tetsuka immediately knelt on one knee, lowering his head and not daring to look directly into those eyes. Everyone present was an elite member of the Uchiha clan. They all knew of the Mangekyo Sharingan, knew it was the ultimate form of Uchiha power, and knew that the last person to awaken these eyes was Uchiha Madara, the legendary Ashura of the ninja world. But they never imagined that they would witness those eyes on their own chieftain. However, there was still one person standing. Young Itachi Uchiha stood at the doorway, quietly watching everything that was happening. "Father!" Itachi Uchiha spoke softly, his voice tinged with confusion and a barely perceptible hint of fear. Fugaku Uchiha did not respond to his son. He slowly turned around, his Mangekyo Sharingan scanning everyone present. Those whose gaze fell upon them couldn't help but feel a shiver run down their spines. "Yatsushiro." Fugaku Uchiha spoke, his voice eerily calm, creating a strange contrast with the blood and tears in his eyes. The 8th Hokage of Uchiha shuddered, straightening his body with an unprecedented posture, his voice booming like a bell. "Chieftain! Immediately notify all elders and clan members of rank 10 or higher to convene an emergency meeting at the underground assembly hall of Nanga Shrine in 1 hour. Fugaku Uchiha's voice was flat, but every word carried immense weight. "Please ensure Zishui attends. Furthermore, seal off all entrances and exits to the clan's territory, no one may enter or leave before the meeting concludes." "Yes." The 8th Hokage of Uchiha turned to leave. "Etc." Fugaku called out to him. "Be polite, especially to Shisui. Tell him that the Uchiha clan needs his power and his judgment." The 8th Hokage of Uchiha paused for a moment, then nodded emphatically. "Clear." He rushed out of the mansion, his figure quickly disappearing into the night. Uchiha Inaisa and the others also stood up, awaiting further instructions. Fugaku waved his hand, "You all go and prepare. Inaisa, you're in charge of arranging the guard. Tetsuka, you compile a list of all the clan's combat personnel and their equipment." "Yes." Everyone quickly left. Only Fugaku Uchiha and Itachi Uchiha remained in the room. Itachi Uchiha stepped forward, looked up at Fugaku's still bleeding eyes, and asked softly. "Father, do your eyes hurt?" Fugaku Uchiha looked down at his son, his Mangekyo Sharingan slowly stopping its rotation and returning to normal black eyes. He crouched down and reached out to pat Itachi's head. "It doesn't hurt," Fugaku Uchiha said, his voice finally regaining a touch of warmth. "But I saw something I didn't want to see." "Is it the extermination that Tianmu mentioned?" Uchiha Itachi asked, though he was young, he could still understand the meaning of the word. "Will we, the Uchiha, all die?" Fugaku Uchiha remained silent for a long time. Finally, he took a deep breath and stood up. Won't. His voice regained its firmness. Now that I knew beforehand, I will never let this happen unless I'm dead. Itaki, go and rest, I still have things to take care of. I also want to go to the meeting. Fugaku Uchiha looked at his son and finally nodded. Okay. But you can only listen in, you can't speak. Chapter 11. Outside the mansion, the Uchiha clan compound was in an uproar. Without the need for the 8th Hokage and others to go door to door to inform everyone, the news had already spread throughout the entire Uchiha clan as they watched the sky. They gradually emerged from their homes and gathered in the streets. More and more people gathered, seemingly filling the streets. Their mixed emotions, fear, anger, disbelief, converged into an unstoppable torrent. The old man comforted the child, the men gripped their weapons, and the women donned military uniforms. Extermination of the entire clan. How could this be? It's Konoha. It must be a high-ranking official from Konoha. What did we do wrong? Fight them! A cacophony of voices mingled together, and panic spread. Just then, a green figure leaped and landed steadily on the streets of the Uchiha clan's territory. Uchiha Shisui, the youngest elite of the Uchiha clan, hailed as a genius with the Shisui of the body flicker. His face was pale, but his eyes remained calm. Stop the water! A member of the tribe immediately recognized him and shouted out. Clearly, we feel more at ease in times like these when there must be strong leaders standing at the forefront. Uchiha Shisui nodded to the clan members and strode towards Uchiha Fugaku's residence. Uchiha Hachimoku and the others had no choice but to disregard Fugaku's arrangements and guide all the clan members to gather at the clan's territory. At this point, everyone's emotions were already at a breaking point, and these radicals dared not ignite a spark. When Uchiha Shisui entered the clan head's residence and saw Uchiha Fugaku, his gaze lingered for a moment on Fugaku's eyes, which still bore traces of blood, but he asked nothing. Lord Fugaku, I've arrived. You saw it. I saw it. Uchiha Shisui's tone was somewhat heavy. Although he was biased towards the village, he never intended to exterminate the Uchiha clan. Therefore, the Uchiha clan will be wiped out in the future. Fugaku Uchiha's voice was soft, but every word carried immense weight, striking Shisui Uchiha's heart. And I, as the clan leader, was unable to stop it. Uchiha Shisui fell silent. After all, it was a matter of the future, and the situation was unclear. And what about myself? Why didn't they make a move? Fugaku Uchiha walked towards the door, looking at the clansmen who were gradually gathering in the night. Shisui, I know you've always believed that the Uchiha situation can be improved peacefully. I used to believe that too. Fugaku Uchiha turned his head and looked at Shisui, his eyes gleaming slightly in the darkness. But now, the heavens are telling us that compromise and waiting will only lead to our annihilation. What will you choose? Uchiha Shisui closed his eyes. A few seconds later, he opened his eyes, and the Sharingan in his eyes slowly rotated. I am still an Uchiha. Uchiha Shisui said, his voice firm. But I believe this was definitely not something the third Hokage did. Fugaku Uchiha nodded. He walked out the door, towards the terrified clansmen, and strode towards the clan's territory. Meanwhile, in the heavens, the voice from the celestial curtain continued, evaluating the third Hokage's rule and bestowing upon him the posthumous title of Fire Profound Sect. But at this moment, not a single Uchiha clan member cared about those things anymore. The shadow of genocide loomed over everyone's heart. The Uchiha clan's territory was brightly lit, creating a stark contrast with the night. A storm is brewing. Meanwhile, in the shadows at the edge of the Uchiha clan's territory, several figures wearing animal masks quietly retreated and sped towards the Hokage building. Konoha Year 1. Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha still stood side by side. A gentle breeze swept across the hillside, ruffling their long hair, yet they remained silent. Clearly, even for the god of shinobi and the Azura of the shinobi world, the information about the Uchiha clan's annihilation was far too horrifying. After all, the Uchiha and Senju clans fought each other for over 1,000 years without incident. However, after the Uchiha clan allied with the Senju clan to establish Konoha for the sake of peace, their lineage was cut off. No matter how you look at it, it's a joke that's as lame as it gets. Madara Uchiha gazed down at the figures gathered in twos and threes, watching the Sky Senju, Sarutobi, and Hyuga clansmen, and of course, Uchiha clansmen. The Uchiha ninjas were living in harmony with their former mortal enemies. But the heavens told them, decades later, the Uchiha clan would be wiped out. Hashirama Senju took a deep breath, his chest heaving. He had to say something to break the suffocating silence. Spot! Hashirama, did you see that? Madara Uchiha interrupted him instantly, but did not turn his head, still gazing at the village below. This is the village of your dreams. While we appear united and harmonious after our deaths, undercurrents are actually surging. The Uchiha clan will be isolated and monitored, and may even be driven to extermination. Is this the peace you wanted? Madara Uchiha's voice rose at the end, filled with barely suppressed anger and pain. Hashirama Senju opened his mouth, as if to say something, but found his throat dry. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms, forcing himself to remain calm. The situation isn't necessarily what you think. According to the intelligence from the Sky Curtain, this wasn't done by that brat Sarutobi. Ha! The art of balance, light at the front, darkness at the back. Madara Uchiha suddenly turned around and finally looked at Hashirama Senju. His eyes had somehow transformed into Sharingan again, and the kaleidoscope was spinning wildly. Is this his method of governing the village? Tolerating darkness and ignoring injustice? He stepped forward, almost touching Hashirama, and his voice was forced out through clenched teeth. Hashirama, tell me. If Izuna were still alive, if he knew the Uchiha clan's final fate was like this, what would he say? Before he died, he told me to protect my people and not to negotiate with the Thousand Hands. I failed to do either. Hashirama Senju's pupils suddenly contracted. That's not a reason. Madara Uchiha took a step back, his Sharingan slowly ceasing its rotation, the anger in his eyes transforming into a terrifying calm. If you're tired, you should step down and make way for someone more capable, instead of clinging to your position and allowing problems to worsen in the name of balance. He recalled a fleeting image across the sky, the Uchiha clan crest submerged in a pool of blood, the blurred corpses, the congealed blood, that was the future of the Uchiha. I won't let that happen. Madara Uchiha suddenly spoke, his voice filled with determination. He turned away, no longer looking at the village below, no longer looking at Hashirama, but looking south the direction where the Uchiha clan's territory was located. If this is how Konoha's future is, then this village had no reason to exist in the first place. After saying that, he turned to leave. Spots. A hand suddenly reached out and grabbed his shoulder. That hand was very steady and heavy. Madara Uchiha could feel the warmth and power emanating from his palm. He instinctively tried to break free, but the hand remained motionless. It wasn't that Hashirama Senju used a lot of strength, but rather that Madara realized, he didn't really want to break free. Let go. Madara Uchiha didn't turn around, his voice was icy. I won't let go. Hashirama Senju's voice came from behind. If you leave, there will truly be nothing left. Stay and watch the Uchiha clan be wiped out. Madara Uchiha sneered. Hashirama, my people are not bargaining chips, not things to be sacrificed for your dream of peace. I know. Hashirama Senju's voice suddenly rose in pitch. Therefore, we must change. Now that we know the future, let's change it. He walked around to face Madara Uchiha, grabbed Madara's shoulders, and forced Madara to look at him. Those eyes, which were always full of enthusiasm, were now bloodshot and weary. "Ban, listen to me. The sky tells us what might happen in the future, but it doesn't say it's inevitable. It tells us where the problem lies. The Uchiha clan is marginalized, the higher ups condone darkness, and the Hokage has lost his original aspirations. So let's solve the problem before it arises." "How to solve this?" Madara Uchiha stared at him. For a moment, Hashirama Senju was stunned. After a long silence, he spoke. "Madara, I'll relinquish the Hokage position right now. Let more Uchiha clan members enter the core leadership, let your opinions be heard. We must." He paused, his voice becoming softer, but more determined. "We must protect this village together. Ban, when we first started building the village, you said you were willing to take a gamble, betting that this dream would come true. Now, the gamble has taken a turn for the worse. We've seen the worst case scenario. But that doesn't mean we should give up, instead, we should adjust our strategy and increase our stakes." Madara Uchiha looked at Hashirama, and in those eyes was that familiar, almost irritating sincerity. After all these years, he's still the same, believing in those illusory things, believing that people's hearts can change, believing that hatred can be resolved. But Madara Uchiha recalled the Uchiha who had worked alongside the Senju clan on the construction site. He remembered yesterday when an Uchiha child had broken his leg, and a Senju medical ninja had rushed to treat him. He remembered the night before last when the elders of both clans sat together drinking, telling stories from the Warring States period, and finally bursting into laughter. These moments are real. "Hashira." Madara Uchiha finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Do you know what I hate most about you?" What? Hashirama Senju was taken aback. "What I hate most is that you always give me hope." Madara Uchiha said that his Sharingan slowly closed, returning to normal black eyes. He shook off Hashirama's hand, but did not leave. Instead, he walked back to the edge of the platform and looked down at the village under construction below. "I don't believe your dream can be fully realized, Hashirama. The barriers and prejudices in people's hearts will not disappear just because of one village." Madara Uchiha said calmly. "But I really can't watch the Uchiha clan be wiped out." He turned and looked at Hashirama Senju. "So I will stay. But not for your dream, but for my clan. I will keep an eye on this village, on every Hokage, on every decision that might harm the Uchiha. If one day Konoha truly heads towards the future foretold by the heavens." A dangerous glint flashed in Madara Uchiha's eyes. "I will destroy it with my own hands." Hashirama Senju looked at him, his face showing no anger, but rather a smile. "Then it's settled. You stay, and together we'll make sure that future doesn't happen." Madara Uchiha did not answer, but simply stared silently down below. Chapter 12. Konoha's 60th Anniversary Training Ground. Before Kakashi could even feel saddened by the mention of his father, White Fang's suicide in the sky, he caught a glimpse of something unusual in the distance. Sasuke was kneeling on the ground, his hands tightly covering his eyes, his body curled up. A faint, dark red glow could be seen through the gaps between the fingers. "Sasuke!" Kakashi's voice suddenly rose in pitch. Almost simultaneously, Naruto and Sakura also noticed their companion's unusual behavior. The three of them quickly rushed to Sasuke's side, kicking up dust from the training ground. Naruto and Sakura were at a loss, but Kakashi reacted instantly. "Sharingan." It seems that the heavenly curtain has reignited Sasuke's negative memories, causing him to awaken his Sharingan. "Step back." Kakashi used a commanding tone, which is unusual for him. Naruto and Sakura reluctantly took a few steps back, but their eyes remained fixed on Sasuke. Sasuke's body trembled violently. The image that flashed across the sky was replaying wildly in his mind. But deeper memories were stirred, pushing aside forbidden zones that the body's protective mechanisms had kept tightly shut for years. A blood-red knight, a long sword stained with the blood of his people, and the face of that man. And there was his own reflection in the blood-red light, his single tomo eye swirling. Ah! Sasuke finally spoke. He abruptly raised his head and removed his hands from his eyes. His originally jet-black pupils had turned dark red, and within the crimson light, a megatama slowly rotated. In fact, Sasuke had already activated his one tomo aura on the night of the massacre of his clan, but his body's protective mechanism made him forget about it. It wasn't until he saw the scene of the massacre again today that his dormant eyes were activated, which happened several months earlier than in the Naruto storyline. Sasuke was panting heavily, his newly formed single tomo Sharingan swirling around blankly before finally focusing on Kakashi's face. His eyes were vacant, as if he hadn't completely escaped from his memories. I remember now. Sasuke's voice was terribly hoarse. That night. I remember it all. Sasuke. Naruto wanted to step forward, but Kakashi stopped him by raising his hand. Let him calm down on his own. Kakashi said in a low voice. The awakening of the Sharingan is accompanied by intense emotional shocks, he needs time to process them. Naruto was so anxious he scratched his head, but in the end he obediently stood still. Konoha Year 48, Hokage's Office. The Nine-Tailed Fox's Rebellion. Minato Namikaze stood by the window, his body visibly stiff. It's been 48 years since Konoha last had a Nine-Tails attack. Keep in mind, the Nine-Tails was sealed inside Kushina's body. But Kushina was a member of the Uzumaki clan, and she claimed to be second only to the Uzumaki in the ninja world in her mastery of sealing techniques. No one dared to claim the top spot. How could the Nine-Tails escape her control? In an instant, Minato Namikaze seemed to remember something, and his body jolted. Kushina is currently pregnant, and childbirth will coincide with her weakened state as a Jinchuriki. The Heavenly Curtain stated his term is only 1 year, and considering Kushina's delivery time, it's highly likely he will die in this so-called Nine-Tails Rampage incident. Or, resigning because the damage caused by this incident was too great? Just as Minato Namikaze was lost in thought, Kushina Uzumaki walked to his side and gently took his hand. Nine-tailed. Kushina Uzumaki's voice trembled. Is it, the one inside me? Minato Namikaze gently grasped his wife's hand, his voice soft. Not necessarily. It could be the Nine-Tails at some other point in time. The Heavenly Curtain didn't specify the time. But he knew in his heart that it was most likely the one currently sealed inside Kushina's body. In the entire ninja world, only Konoha possesses a Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. If I lose control... Kushina Uzumaki lowered her head, her long red hair obscuring her expression. If I really hurt the village... No, it won't. Minato Namikaze turned around, cupped his wife's face in his hands, and forced her to look at him. Kushina, you are stronger than anyone else. You can control the Nine-Tails, I believe in you. But deep in his eyes, there was the same worry. The Heavenly Curtain wouldn't mention the Nine-Tails Rampage without reason, which means it could indeed happen in the future. And if it happens during his short term, I will research new sealing techniques to ensure everything is foolproof. If all else fails... Minato Namikaze pulled Kushina into his arms, his voice fading into inaudibility. If it really doesn't work out, maybe we should just not have this child. In a previous timeline, Danzo Shimura strode into the Hokage building, the sound of his cane tapping the marble floor echoing rapidly and heavily in the empty corridor. Everyone could feel the anger emanating from him. Bang! The double doors to the Hokage's office were suddenly pushed open, slamming against the wall with a loud bang. Danzo Shimura strode in, slamming his cane heavily on the floor, his eyes fixed on Hiruzen Sarutobi. Hiruzen, the Anbu reports that there's unusual activity on the Uchiha clan's territory. He watched as Hiruzen Sarutobi was beheaded, but didn't even turn his head, his brows were only slightly furrowed. I know. Hiruzen Sarutobi's luck further enraged Danzo. The Uchiha clan compound is now under complete martial law. All entrances and exits are guarded by Uchiha security personnel, prohibiting any non-Uchiha personnel from entering. Even the Anbu on their daily patrols are being kept out. Hiruzen Sarutobi fell silent, countless images flashing through his mind. Fugaku's always composed face, the wary eyes in the Uchiha clan's territory, the Uchiha clan crest in the blood-soaked sky, and even longer ago, when Uchiha Kagami held his hand before his death and said, "Hiruzen, the Uchiha are also a part of Konoha. Continue monitoring." Hiruzen Sarutobi finally spoke. But don't provoke them. Especially, avoid conflict. Hiruzen. Danzo Shimura took a sudden step forward, slamming his cane heavily onto the ground again. His facial muscles twitched, and his eyes burned with rage. It's already this late. You're still indecisive. They convened a tribal meeting and declared martial law, this was already a harbinger of rebellion. What is the Uchiha clan planning? After their conspiracy was exposed by the heavens, will they resort to desperate measures? Danzo, calm down. Hiruzen Sarutobi's voice remained steady. The projection on the screen is of the future, not the present. It's normal for the Uchiha to feel panic and wariness upon seeing the possibility of their clan being wiped out. We must not label this as a rebellion. A normal reaction. Danzo Shimura sneered. The proper response should have been to immediately send a representative to the Hokage building to explain the situation and request the village's protection. Not to blockade the clan's territory and hold a secret meeting. Hiruzen, you've been Hokage for decades, and you don't even have this much sensitivity. Hiruzen Sarutobi finally turned around to face Danzo, his Hokage robes trailing behind him. It's because I've been Hokage for decades that I know when to be firm and when to be cautious. Provoking the Uchiha now is pushing them to extremes. The heavenly curtain has already revealed a future where the clan might be wiped out. If we take drastic action now, it's tantamount to telling the Uchiha that the village was behind it. What will they choose then? To sit and wait for their fate, or to fight to the death? Then let's strike first. Danzo Shimura practically shouted it out. Mobilize all forces to seal off all streets surrounding the Uchiha clan's territory. Send an envoy in to demand that Fugaku immediately disband the gathering and come out to explain. If he refuses. If you refuse, are you prepared to launch a full-scale attack? Hiruzen Sarutobi interrupted him, his voice finally rising slightly. Danzo, do you know how many fighters the Uchiha have? Do you know how many people from Konoha will die if war breaks out? And what will the other ninja clans think? What will the other villages do? A short, sharp pain is always better than a long, drawn-out one. Danzo Shimura refused to back down. The Uchiha problem isn't new. Ever since the Nine Tails attack, they've been secretly plotting something. Now that the Heavenly Veil has exposed their fate, they either surrender or rebel. There's no third way. Their gazes met in mid-air, like two knives clashing. The office was silent for a few seconds. Finally, Hiruzen Sarutobi took a deep breath and broke the deadlock. Danzo. I understand your concerns. But I am the Hokage, and I must be responsible for the entire village. Taking drastic measures now is too risky. We must give the Uchiha clan a chance, and also give the village a chance to avoid civil war. Chance? Danzo Shimura scoffed. Hiruzen, you're always like this. How many more chances do you want before you admit that some people can never truly integrate into Konoha? The Uchiha are different. They are one of the founding clans of Konoha, and they shed blood for the village. We cannot take action against them now because of future possibilities. So you're going to wait for them to make the first move. Danzo Shimura took a step closer, almost touching Hiruzen Sarutobi. Will you only admit you are wrong when the Uchiha's kunao are at the villagers' necks, and when their fire-style techniques have burned down half of Konoha? Danzo. Hiruzen Sarutobi's voice finally carried a hint of anger. Hiruzen. Danzo Shimura roared back. You will drag Konoha into the abyss. Just like you indulged Orochimaru back then. Hiruzen Sarutobi slammed his hand on the desk, the solid wood surface groaning under the weight. He straightened up, his Hokage robes fluttering even without wind, and his usually gentle eyes flashed with the sharp light of a true ninja hero. I am the Hokage. The sound was like thunder, exploding in the office. Danzo Shimura froze instantly, staring at Hiruzen, trembling with rage, but unable to utter a sound. He took a step back, turned and walked toward the door, his cane scraping the floor with a harsh sound. You're the Hokage. You're in charge. But Hiruzen, you'll regret this. After saying that, he forcefully pulled open the door and slammed it shut with a bang. Hiruzen Sarutobi stood there for a long while, then softly said to the empty office. Strengthen surveillance of the Uchiha clan's territory and deploy 3 ANBU squads to stand by in the surrounding area. From the shadows, a figure silently emerged, the member of the Dark Guard, wearing an animal mask, knelt on one knee. But remember, without my direct order, no one is allowed to enter Uchiha clan territory or engage in conflict with the Uchiha. Yes. The ANBU ninja bowed his head in response. In addition, Hiruzen Sarutobi paused. Arrange a meeting between me and clan chief Fugaku, and formally extend an invitation in the name of the Hokage. The time is set for tomorrow morning, and the location is the Hokage building, my office. Yes, Hokage-sama. The ninja disappeared, vanishing back into the shadows, and the office returned to silence. The comments from Jizhung Tianmyo continued. Chapter 13. Diplomatic Assessment. While his domestic policies were relatively sound, Hiruzen Sarutobi's diplomatic performance was far worse. His core foreign policy can be summarized in 2 words: compromise. A prime example is during the Third Shinobi World War, when, as a victorious nation, Konoha proactively negotiated peace with the defeated Iwagakure village, relinquishing substantial war reparations and territorial claims. This sparked widespread resentment within Konoha and was one of the catalysts for his first resignation. The visuals, combined with text, depict scenes from the later stages of the Third Shinobi World War. With the victory at the Battle of Konobe Bridge, the Konoha ninja gained the upper hand on the battlefield, and the Iwagakure forces suffered repeated defeats. But just as Konoha was about to achieve a decisive victory, an order from the Hokage's office reached the front lines: halt the offensive and negotiate peace with Iwagakure. Next was Iwagakure. Onaki, the ruler of the 2 scales, sat in the Tsuchikage's office, looking at the peace terms with an expression of disbelief that then turned into ecstasy. Konoha 48th year. Minato Namikaze frowned as he looked at the images on the screen and the diplomatic assessment of Hiruzen Sarutobi. As a ninja who experienced the Third Shinobi World War, Minato Namikaze knew all too well the cruelty of that war. Obito and Rin sacrificed themselves, Kakashi was devastated, and countless Konoha ninjas bled and died in the war. In the end, what they got in return was the Third Hokage's willingness to waive war reparations and territorial claims. Although this allowed him to rise to power quickly, he preferred to continue the war and make Iwagakure pay the price. However, as members of a military organization, ninjas were solely obligated to obey orders. But that didn't mean they had no complaints, so the Third Hokage resigned to take responsibility. An overly conservative diplomatic strategy, while preventing the war from escalating, also cost Konoha significant practical benefits and severely damaged morale. As the victorious nation, its voluntary concessions were seen as a sign of weakness, indirectly emboldening other ninja villages to wage war. Iwagakure, Hidden Stone Village, Tsuchikage's office, during the Third Shinobi World War. As Onaki watched the images playing on the screen, a complex smile, tinged with irony and relief, appeared on his old face. Ha 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 ha. Onaki muttered to himself. Hiruzen Sarutobi, you knew you'd choose that. He recalled the current state of the war. It was the most intense period of the Third Shinobi World War, with Iwagakure and Konoha locked in a stalemate on the border of the Land of Grass, both sides suffering heavy casualties. Onaki had already prepared for the worst. If the war continued to deteriorate, Iwagakure might have to cede territory and pay huge reparations. But now the heavens are telling him, don't be afraid, Hiruzen Sarutobi will take the initiative to seek peace when he has the upper hand, and he will give up most of his demands. Cowardice! Onaki commented, but there was no contempt in his tone. No, it wasn't cowardice, it was excessive idealism. He thought that backing down would bring peace, that compromise would eliminate hatred. But he was wrong. The rules of the ninja world have always been the survival of the fittest. If you take a step back, someone else will take two. He looked at the map in the office. So now. Onaki was deep in thought. Now that we know where things are headed, could we be a little more aggressive? What if he deliberately feigns weakness now, luring Konoha deeper, and then gains more ground before the time for peace talks foreshadowed by the celestial curtain arrives? Or, why not simply disregard the future foretold by the heavens, and instead of waiting for Konoha to proactively seek peace, propose peace terms more favorable to Iwagakure? No, we mustn't be too greedy. Onaki quickly dismissed the idea. While the future revealed by the celestial curtain may change, the general trend will not be wrong. Hiruzen Sarutobi's personality dictates that he tends towards compromise in diplomacy. Rather than risking change, it's better to go with the flow and strive for more practical benefits. He rang the bell on the table, and Huang Tu walked in. Notify the frontline command to adjust the operational strategy. Onaki said. From this day forward, adopt a defensive posture and reduce proactive attacks. However, at the same time, it is imperative to hold the existing defensive line. Now, it depends on whether Konoha or we have more patience. Yes, Dad. Huang Tu took notes and answered questions simultaneously. Besides, Noki added. Prepare a peace negotiation mission. But do not send it out yet, await my orders. After Huang Tu left, Onaki looked up at the sky again. The scene had switched to other content, but he already had a complete plan in mind. Now that we know the future, we should make use of it. The scene shifts to a moonlit night. Konoha village, the territory of the Hyuga clan. Young Hinata Hyuga was fast asleep, but a pair of arms reached out from the shadows. The most criticized diplomatic move occurred in Konoha 54, when Kumigakure, seeking to gain a Byakugan, a powerful deity, kidnapped Hinata Hyuga, the eldest daughter of the Hyuga clan head, under the guise of peace talks. The footage clearly shows the entire process. A shadowy clad cloud village ninja carries the unconscious Hinata Hyuga in an attempt to escape, but is killed by a single palm strike from Hayashi Hyuga, the head of the Hyuga clan. However, after their defeat, Kumigakure turned around and falsely accused Konoha of killing the peace envoy. The scene cuts to the Cloud Village delegation's residence, where Cloud Village ninjas carry the corpse of their comrade and angrily accuse the Konoha negotiators. The camera zooms out to the conference room in the Hokage building. Hiruzen Sarutobi sits at the head of the table, flanked by Koharu Yudatan and Homura Mitokado, while opposite them stands the aggressive representative of Kumigakure. Outside the window, Hayashi Hyuga kneels in the corridor outside the conference room, head bowed, hands clenched into fists on his knees, knuckles white. In the end, Hiruzen Sarutobi chose to let the matter rest, sacrificing Hisashi Hyuga's life in place of Hayashi Hyuga as a way of giving peace to Kumigakure. Although this was set after the Nine Tails attack, with Konoha losing its top-tier fighter, the fourth Hokage Minato Namikaze, along with a large number of ninja and the loss of control over the Nine Tails, Hiruzen Sarutobi's actions still chilled the hearts of many Konoha ninja. Over time, this led to almost no one offering him any assistance during Orochimaru's Konoha Crush plan. After all, Konoha still possessed powerful figures like Hiruzen Sarutobi, Danzo Shimura, and Jiraiya at the time, so Kumigakure didn't have an absolute chance of winning and ultimately did not take any action. It can be said that the Hyuga incident was the biggest stain on Hiruzen Sarutobi's foreign policy, severely damaging the Hokage's prestige and Konoha's cohesion. Konoha Year 1. Hashirama Senju recalled the fleeting image of the Nine-Tails rampage, his tone grave. It seems the Nine-Tails is truly dangerous, we must consider how to control it. Konoha Year 54, Hyuga clan territory. Hayashi Hyuga stood on the veranda of his own courtyard, looking up at the sky. When he saw the scene of young Hinata being kidnapped, his pupils suddenly contracted, and his Byakugan went out of control. Hidden clouds. Hayashi Hyuga spat out those two words through clenched teeth, his voice icy cold. The Cloud Village delegation is indeed scheduled to visit soon, ostensibly to discuss post-war cooperation. Everything makes sense. Father. Hinata Hyuga's timid voice came from behind. The almost 3-year-old Hinata stood timidly by the door, looking at her father anxiously. Hayashi Hyuga turned around, knelt down, and gently stroked his daughter's head. His movements were gentle, but deep in his eyes was suppressed anger and lingering fear. If Tenmaku hadn't given him a warning, if he hadn't foreseen this future, Hinata might really have been kidnapped. And according to Tenmaku, although he saved his daughter, it would lead to his younger brother Hisashi dying in his place. Hinata, from today onwards, you shouldn't go out and play alone anymore. Hijikata said, trying to keep his voice as gentle as possible. If you're going to play, make sure the main family's guards accompany you. Why? Hinata Hyuga tilted her head. Because, there are bad people outside. Hayashi Hyuga hugged his daughter, then stood up. Go find your mother. Hinata nodded and turned to leave under the protection of her guards. Hayashi Hyuga watched her small figure as her fist slowly clenched. He turned and walked back into the house, going to the study. The younger brother, Rizashi, was tidying up scrolls and examining the sky. Seeing his elder brother enter, he looked up and smiled. Brother, you saw the sky? I never imagined I would be so brave in the future, dying in your place. Hyuga Hisashi spoke casually, as if he were talking about something unrelated to himself. But the caged bird seal on his forehead was particularly glaring in the candlelight. I won't let that happen. Neither Hinata being kidnapped, nor you dying in my place, will happen. Hyuga Hisashi's smile faded slightly. He put down the scroll and looked intently at his brother. But what if it actually happens? If Kumigakure really comes demanding their return, if the Hokage really demands an explanation from the Hyuga clan? Brother, you are the head of the main family, you cannot die. And I, a member of the branch family, exist to protect the main family. Shut up. Hayashi Hyuga, unusually, lost his temper with his younger brother. You're not a tool, you're my brother. The two brothers looked at each other, and the study was silent. The sky outside the window was still playing, but those future scenes seemed so distant yet so close,